Hi everyone, welcome. The system that you see out here on the bench is a bin of red wiggler worms preparing to get fed. It's a 207-day-old system. The last check-in was 13 days ago, so we kind of missed its 200th day in service milestone day, so happy 200 plus days in service now. And this system, over its lifetime in this bin, has been fed 17 times, and the 14 most recent feedings have been things that were not first frozen. So almost everything I give to my worms is first frozen, but in the case of this bin, we figured we would try, a little something different. So most of the things that you see here are things that you wouldn't even expect to be frozen anyway, such as some used coffee and an old moldy roll. But this cucumber would normally go into my freezer awaiting feeding to the worms, but this particular cucumber was not first frozen. You might recognize it because it is actually the other half of the cucumber, the same cucumber that was fed to these little guys 13 days ago. So I guess I held on to that other half of the cucumber thinking that, if for whatever reason it doesn't get used up over the course of whatever amount of time would be the interval between feedings, then it could always come in handy as the next non-frozen feeding for these little guys. See some springtails hanging out in here, which is kind of common in many of my systems, unfortunately. I'm not a big fan of the springtails, but I guess they're starting to grow on me or whatever. Not that I'm going to ever enjoy having springtails in my worm bins, I don't think. But I guess it's not freaking me out as much as it used to. They really don't seem to bother the worms, and they're just there helping to break stuff down. So whatever, right? So that coffee filter that was spread out across the middle here was just indicating to us where the last feeding was. And besides the stuff that they got last time, which was in part cucumber, we're also going to probably bump into many of the old things that have been in here for some time now. This is a chunk of gourd. Actually, every time we encounter a piece of this thing, we chip off some, and it just seems to get easier and easier every time. I just barely have to touch it, and chunks of it flake away. And I suppose if we were to leave this piece here, it'll probably be something we could still recognize next time, but if we chip any more of it away, it would probably just end up blending in with the material at large and would no longer be something that we could recognize as what it is. I would think that the cucumber we gave them last time is probably history. And I'm not even sure what other things were placed in here. And speaking of what was placed in here, one of the other things that's been kind of interesting was this object. I don't even know how long it's been in here, but it's the stem of a Brussels sprouts plant, and it was during the last check-in that this thing finally cracked off a piece of itself. It almost seemed like the worms that were actually living within the hollow void of the stem had managed to squirm so much that they sort of just caused the thing to crack open, or at least that's the way it appeared to me during the last check-in, because at the beginning of the check-in it appeared to me like it was still kind of holding together as a single object, but gradually it's just going to continue to fragment into smaller and smaller pieces over time. I'm definitely liking the way that these leaves that we left out on the top surface are looking. I don't know if we maybe just didn't put that many in here, or perhaps some of them are already starting to get broken down by the worms. I can imagine that leaves are probably something that the worms really do like. If I'm not mistaken, we probably added some to the feeding zone too as bedding, sort of a foundational layer of bedding to go in prior to the food that we added. And I've got more leaves, and I'm thinking we're going to go ahead and add even more today. Usually when my systems start to get up into the more advanced ages, I start to steer clear of the leaves, only because I prefer not to see all kinds of sticks and stems in my systems as they get older. So I think this one is already up there in age, probably at the point where perhaps we might want to start giving them bedding that we know is going to break down a little bit more quickly than the leaf stems. The leaves themselves go quick, it's just the stems are a little bit tougher and require more time to break down. But I think we could probably squeeze one more generous application of leafy matter in as part of this feeding, and then perhaps going forward we'll just look for softer, more quickly composting bedding type materials to include in our future feedings here. So, not too surprising that there's no signs of any leftover cucumber. Just gourd, slow composting item, stem of a Brussels sprout. And I guess the one thing that I kind of casually keep probing for as I till my fingers through this material is something that was even mentioned on my little information board here down in the corner, is the old cork. Cork that's been floating around in my systems for many years now. And it has ended up with these worms. But I don't think I've actually encountered the cork for some time now, so I'm not sure where it is. I assume it's still in here. It has to be. Let me go get my leaves. Okay, I could feel that there's still some in here. I was pretty generous with the leaves in my last couple feedings, but I do believe we've still got enough in here. Sure, we got plenty. We're going to drop some of this stuff in here as the foundation for today's feeding, and I like the way the stuff also serves as a really nice top covering out on the surface of the material. So we'll add some of that at the end. Let's go ahead and drop in, well, not only the new foods, but get the old foods in there as well. That's a nice big chunk of cucumber. It is always kind of a shame to see a piece of human food that just didn't get consumed ends up becoming worm food. And even this piece of lime, half of it got used in a beverage and the other half just sort of rolled around on my counter for the past week and a half or so and was sort of neglected. So even though I think I probably still could have squeezed some delicious lime juice out of that thing for yet one more beverage, I figured, you know what, it's not frozen, let's give it to these guys. And you know, whenever I put bread into my worm bins, it seems to me like the one way to ensure that the worms are going to take any interest in it at all is to make sure that it's quite damp. In fact, a lot of times I'll even just submerge the bread into some moisture and allow it to just get completely drenched. But I figured if we were to just give this piece of bread a good thorough squirt down, it should be something that the worms can dig into and enjoy. I've also got a couple other things over here. I've got that portion of coffee that you saw earlier, but before we dump that in, I'm going to sprinkle the foods with some crushed eggshell. Different people use different stuff as grit in their worm bins. Some people just use playground sand or crushed crustacean shells or rock dust or whatever they've got. But for me, the eggshells seem to be the favored grit, because there's always eggshells around here. Not only around here, but my mom provides them too, so I've always got a pretty steady supply of eggshells that I use to make grit out of. We're going to set this coffee filter aside and use it as our replacement feeding zone indicator, which means we can grab the old one that was resting out on top and just include that as part of our feeding here today. But in order to draw some worm traffic onto that, I'm going to take this last bit of material that I was going to also try to do away with some of, which is some breadcrumbs. I think between the breadcrumbs and those two halves of the roll there that I split in half, this system's probably going to have some nice fungal growth down here, some mold type growth. So it does seem like the bread in the worm bins does seem to promote a good bit of fungal growth. So you know what, I think we're going to go on a quick a quick till of the material just to see if by chance I can happen upon the cork. In a lot of my systems I've just been avoiding the outer edges just to leave them be for a little while. I am always very thorough and have a tendency to go plowing through all my systems, pretty much every little bit of the system, but every now and then I just try to get into the habit of breaking away from my routine a little bit. And it also did seem like it would be a nice opportunity to take some of that beautifully seasoned leafy matter that was resting out on the surface since the last check-in and combine it with some of the materials that are down low. Some really nice seasoned bedding just combined throughout the whole bin. Stuff for the worms to nibble on everywhere. Because, you know, the bedding that the worms have does eventually just all become food too. So I definitely like the consistency of the material in here. And I guess if I had bumped into the cork, I probably would have shown it and made mention of it, but I did not. So it does seem like the cork is being a little bit elusive, but I would almost guarantee that it's still in here somewhere. Where, I don't know, but I'm sure at some point in the near future we will encounter it again, but it seems like today is not going to be that day. So we're going to leave these little guys very much the way we left them last time, with a nice little sprinkling of leaves on top, and then in can come our nice replacement feeding zone indicator to show ourselves where today's non-frozen feeding was put, which was right down the middle. Not too surprising, that's pretty much my routine. So that's it for our check-in. Now with these red wigglers, seem to be doing really nicely in here. And I guess I'll have to start thinking about their next meal, setting some stuff aside, because I'm all out of cucumber. Alright everyone, I got a few things to take care of getting cleaned up, put away, but I'm not going to waste your time with that, because that's boring. Before I go though, really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.